Dylan Matthews had always believed that his home was more than just four walls. It was his sanctuary. A dedicated software engineer and a proud suburban dad, Dylan spent his weekends tending to his meticulously maintained property. At the center of his oasis was a stunning, crystal-clear pool that sparkled under the summer sun. For him, the pool wasn't simply a luxury. It was a place where memories were made, where his children splashed on hot afternoons, and where lively family gatherings filled the air with laughter. Every inch of his backyard had been lovingly designed. Carefully pruned hedges, an artfully arranged array of tropical plants, and a mosaic-tiled patio all spoke of Dylan's eye for detail and his commitment to creating a haven from the daily grind. His pool, framed by soft landscape lighting and dotted with tasteful lounge chairs, was his pride and joy, a vibrant testament to freedom and relaxation in an increasingly regimented world. That sense of freedom, however, was about to be shattered by an act of unprovoked mischief. One balmy Saturday afternoon, after hosting one of his famous pool parties, Dylan returned home to an eerie silence. As he stepped out onto the patio, his heart sank. Floating amid the gentle ripples of his cherished pool were a cluster of writhing eels, slimy, unexpected, and utterly out of place. Shocked and confused, Dylan couldn't fathom who would commit such an outrageous act against his sanctuary. Before he could even begin to process the scene, a knock at his door signaled the arrival of an unwelcome visitor. Standing on his doorstep was Kerren Leland, the self-appointed queen of the Homeowners Association. Dressed in a sharply tailored blazer and exuding an air of superiority, Kerren's icy smile did little to hide the satisfaction in her eyes. "Mr. Matthews," she began in a clipped tone, "it appears that you've allowed your property to fall into disarray. These eels in your pool are not only unsightly, but a violation of our community's standards." Dylan's pulse quickened. "Kerren, this isn't some act of negligence on my part. It's a deliberate vandalism. My pool is my pride, my family's retreat. I demand to know who did this," he insisted, his voice a mix of disbelief and righteous indignation. Kerren's gaze remained cool, her tone measured and condescending. "The HOA has clear rules regarding the maintenance of exterior property. I'm afraid that such unsanitary conditions, even if they're unconventional, must be addressed immediately. Consider this your first and final warning to restore your pool to acceptable standards." The confrontation left Dylan seething. As Kerren turned on her heel, her parting words hanging in the humid air, neighbors peeking through drawn curtains exchanged whispered comments. For Dylan, the pool had always been a personal expression of creativity and comfort. Now it had been violated by someone's twisted sense of humor, sanctioned by an entitled bureaucrat. In that moment, a spark of determination ignited within him. He would not stand idly by while his cherished haven was desecrated, and he would soon discover that this was only the beginning of a long battle against an HOA that thrived on petty authoritarianism. Later that evening, as twilight bathed the pool in a gentle glow, Dylan began to formulate his plan. He retrieved his security camera system, a modest but reliable setup he'd installed for peace of mind, and resolved to document every move the HOA would make. Little did he know that the discovery of the eels was just the opening act in a saga of escalating absurdities, one that would soon see him standing up not only for his property, but for the very right of every homeowner to enjoy their space without fear of arbitrary, overreaching rules. The morning after the eel incident, Dylan awoke to a crisp envelope taped to his front door. The letter, embossed with the HOA's insignia, was a formal notice citing unsanitary conditions and non-compliance with community standards, a thinly veiled reference to the eels in his pool. Inside, a steep fine of $750 was detailed in precise, impersonal language. As Dylan stepped outside, Kerren was already waiting on the immaculate sidewalk. Her expression was as smug as ever, her posture rigid with self-importance. "Good morning, Mr. Matthews," she said coolly. "I trust you have received our notice. Our community thrives on order, and your inability to maintain that order will not be tolerated." Dylan held the letter in one hand, his other fist clenching in determination. "Kerren, my pool is maintained to the highest standards. This is not a result of negligence, but of an intentional act of vandalism. I've already contacted the authorities, and I intend to review your claims with a local zoning office. Kerren's smile didn't waver, though her eyes flashed with irritation. The rules apply to every homeowner, regardless of your personal justification. I expect immediate compliance. Should you fail to remedy this situation, further actions, including additional fines and legal proceedings, will be enforced. Undeterred, Dylan calmly informed her, I operate within my legal rights, and I will contest any unfounded fines. My pool is my personal domain. As Kerren turned away, she left behind an air of menace, a silent promise that the HOA would not back down. That afternoon, while waiting for a meeting with a sympathetic zoning official, Dylan meticulously gathered evidence. Photographs of the eel-ridden water, video footage of the pool's current state, and even statements from supportive neighbors who believed that the vandalism was not his fault. In every image and clip, his passion for his home shone through, reinforcing his resolve to fight back against any form of arbitrary control. Later, as he sat by the pool, watching the water gradually clear with the help of a hired service, Dylan's mind churned with thoughts of injustice. The fine was more than just a monetary penalty. It was a symbol of the overreach of an HOA that placed conformity above the personal rights and creativity of its residents. He vowed that he would expose this misuse of power and protect his home at all costs. In the days that followed, Kerren's tactics escalated. While the fine was intended to be a warning, it quickly became apparent that the HOA had no intention of letting the matter rest. Anonymous notices began appearing on doorsteps throughout the neighborhood, citations for improper water features and unsanitary exterior conditions, each more preposterous than the last. Whispers in the cul-de-sac suggested that similar tactics had been used against other homeowners with unique styles. Determined to uncover the truth, Dylan began investigating the inner workings of the HOA. Late one night, he pored over public records and minutes from past HOA meetings, discovering a disturbing pattern. Kerren and her cronies had been using arbitrary fines to siphon money from residents, funneling funds into personal coffers under the guise of community improvement. A few board members, too intimidated by Kerren's domineering personality, had begun to express concerns privately, but fear kept their voices low. Armed with his security footage and copies of correspondence, Dylan documented every instance of what he deemed abuse of power. His cameras, already installed for peace of mind after the eel debacle, recorded not only the aftermath of the incident, but also later encounters with HOA enforcers who patrolled the neighborhood, clipboard in hand. One particularly revealing clip captured a heated conversation between a board member and a frustrated neighbor who had received a nonsensical citation for a defective fountain display. At the next HOA meeting, held in a sterile, fluorescent-lit community hall, Dylan took a stand. With a thick folder of evidence clutched to his chest, he addressed a room filled with uneasy residents. What we're witnessing isn't about maintaining beauty, he declared, his voice resonating with conviction. It's about controlling every aspect of our lives, stifling our individuality, and extorting money from hardworking people. These fines, these absurd citations, they're nothing more than a power grab. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Even a few board members exchanged glances that hinted at doubt. Yet Kerren, ever defiant, dismissed his evidence as misinterpretations of the rules. Our standards are clear, she proclaimed, and you, Mr. Matthews, are the exception that proves the rule. But the damage was done. The seeds of dissent had been sown, and whispers of corruption and overreach began to spread. Dylan, resolute and determined, prepared for the counteroffensive that would soon force the HOA's true colors into the light. The atmosphere in the neighborhood turned charged one humid afternoon when Kerren decided to take matters to an extreme, claiming that Dylan's pool was not only unsightly but a potential health hazard. She ordered an emergency inspection. Early that day, as Dylan was enjoying a quiet moment by the pool, utility workers arrived with intimidating efficiency. Plans were drawn to shut off the water supply and even begin draining the pool if necessary. Dylan, alarmed by the sudden incursion, rushed to intercept them. "Stop this right now," he shouted. My pool is safe, and you have no right to tamper with my property. Amid the commotion, Kerren arrived, her face set in a determined grimace. Mr. Matthews, I'm afraid you leave me no choice. The HOA must act in the best interest of our community, and your pool is a glaring exception to our standards. Her words, as cold as they were final, sent a chill through everyone present. Unwilling to be bullied, Dylan calmly retreated to his study and reviewed his security footage. There he found indisputable evidence of the initial act, the moment when unknown miscreants, apparently incited by Kerren's twisted sense of fun, dumped a container of eels into his pool. Realizing that this evidence could expose not only the vandalism, but also Kerren's complicity in condoning such outrageous behavior, Dylan decided to take matters into his own hands. At the next HOA meeting, with the community still reeling from the attempted shutdown of his pool, Dylan stepped up. He plugged his laptop into a projector, and to the stunned silence of the room, played the security footage in its entirety. The grainy but unmistakable images of writhing eels floating amid the crystalline water left no room for debate. As the room erupted with gasps and murmurs, Kerren's face turned a deep shade of red. "This is preposterous," she stammered, trying to regain control. "That footage is inconclusive." But the damage had been done. The evidence was irrefutable, and the assembled homeowners began to question not only the legitimacy of the fine, but the very ethics of the HOA. Neighbors, emboldened by the revelation, started voicing their own experiences of arbitrary fines and unexplained penalties. In that moment, a movement was born, a collective determination to reclaim their rights and to stand against a regime that sought to dictate every aspect of their lives. With every passing minute, Kerren's authority eroded further, replaced by a growing sense of unity and resistance among the residents. As the community's outrage reached a fever pitch, Kerren found herself scrambling to salvage what remained of her authority. In a final desperate bid to reassert control, she resolved to take the fight directly to Dylan's doorstep. Early one foggy morning, armed with a stack of legal documents and accompanied by a couple of HOA enforcers, Kerren stormed onto Dylan's property under the pretext of conducting an urgent health and safety inspection. "Mr. Matthews," she barked as she confronted him on his front lawn, "I have been instructed to ensure that your property meets our strict guidelines. Your pool, as it currently stands, is a public hazard and will be subject to immediate remediation." Dylan, who had been preparing breakfast with his family, met her with a calm resolve. "Kerren, you've already had your chance. I have the footage, the evidence of your own involvement in this farce. You have no right to invade my property any further." But Kerren was undeterred. In a final act of desperation, she attempted to detain Dylan on the grounds of noncompliance and public endangerment. As she fumbled through her legal jargon, Dylan subtly activated his security system. Cameras, hidden in plain sight around his home, recorded every moment of the confrontation. Within minutes, neighbors who had long grown suspicious of Kerren's methods began to gather, their smartphones capturing her overreach. The police, alerted by an anonymous call from one of the onlookers, soon arrived. As the officers began reviewing the footage from Dylan's security system, Kerren's argument crumbled. Caught red-handed, her actions now documented beyond dispute, Kerren's last-ditch effort backfired spectacularly. In the glare of the morning light and before an audience of outraged residents, she was forced to retreat, her legal threats reduced to hollow words. "This isn't over," she hissed as she was escorted from the property, her voice barely audible over the murmurs of disapproval. The fallout from Kerren's final, desperate move was swift and uncompromising. With her unauthorized inspection and blatant violation of residents' rights now in the public domain, the community rallied like never before. At a hastily called town hall meeting in the community center, homeowners gathered to demand accountability. The security footage, printed copies of the Eels incident, and a litany of grievances filled the room with undeniable evidence of systemic abuse. In a historic vote, the homeowners passed a motion to remove Kerren from the HOA board. The vote was unanimous, a resounding declaration that no single individual, no matter how entrenched in power, would be allowed to dictate the lives of the community. Within days, news of her expulsion dominated local headlines, and the once feared HOA began to unravel. As Kerren's grip on the community crumbled, the board was forced to resign en masse, and an independent audit was launched to recover the misappropriated funds. For Dylan, this was a bittersweet victory, a hard-won triumph not just for his pool, but for the dignity of every homeowner who had been bullied into silence. Celebrations broke out across the neighborhood. At a community potluck held on Dylan's freshly restored patio, residents toasted their newfound freedom, laughing and sharing stories of past grievances. Dylan, his eyes reflecting both relief and pride, watched as his neighbors reclaimed their voices and their rights. In the weeks that followed Kerren's dramatic downfall, the legal repercussions for the HOA began to mount. A class action lawsuit was swiftly filed on behalf of the residents, alleging mismanagement, arbitrary fines, and the systematic abuse of power that had plagued the community for years. During a tense court session, one by one, homeowners testified about the bizarre fines for unsightly aquatic disturbances and other arbitrary citations that had drained their resources. Dylan's security footage, especially the undeniable record of the eel dumping and Kerren's unauthorized inspection, became key evidence that left no doubt about the corruption at the heart of the HOA's practices. The presiding judge condemned the HOA's actions. This court finds that the HOA, as previously structured, operated outside the bounds of fair governance. The HOA is hereby fined and ordered to implement immediate reforms, she declared. Board members faced additional charges for fraud and misappropriation of funds, and local authorities vowed to overhaul the association's policies to safeguard homeowners' rights in the future. For Dylan, the legal verdict was the ultimate vindication, a final, decisive blow against tyranny that had intruded on his personal sanctuary. His meticulous documentation and unyielding resolve had not only defended his pool, but had sparked a movement that restored justice in the community. With the legal and public battles behind her, Kerren Leland's personal world began to collapse in tandem with her professional one. The lifestyle she once flaunted, lavish outings, designer wardrobes, and the trappings of authority, was swiftly dismantled. Creditors started calling, and foreclosure notices soon arrived on her door. Social media and local news outlets replayed the damning security footage over and over. Kerren, red-faced and desperate, caught in the act of infringing on Dylan's property. No longer the untouchable enforcer of community standards, she became a cautionary tale, a living example of how unchecked power can lead to ruin. The final nail in the coffin came when Kerren was forced to accept position as an assistant property manager for a small, rundown HOA in a neighboring town, a job that was as humbling as it was ironic. As she shuffled into her new office, former residents of her old community exchanged knowing looks and quiet whispers of, "That's what happens when you abuse your power." Dylan, hearing of her new fate, couldn't help but smile wryly. "I hope you enjoy following orders," he remarked to a friend, a subtle note of poetic justice echoing in his tone. Kerren's once mighty reign was over, and her fall from grace served as a stark reminder that no one is above accountability. In the months that followed, a palpable sense of relief and renewal swept through the neighborhood. The oppressive regime of arbitrary rules and punitive fines had been replaced by a community that celebrated individuality, creativity, and mutual respect. Dylan Matthews returned to his pool, a symbol of his hard-won victory, reinvigorated by the knowledge that his home and the rights of every homeowner were finally secure. At a festive block party held on a warm summer evening, neighbors gathered around Dylan's pool, now sparkling under the gentle glow of twilight. Amid laughter and lively conversation, someone produced a playful violation notice citing excessive fun in the pool as an ironic nod to days gone by. With a wry smile and a gleam in his eye, Dylan accepted the faux citation and declared, "They really tried, but in the end, we reclaimed our space and our freedom." His words, simple yet profound, resonated with everyone present, a final mic drop moment that encapsulated the community's hard-fought triumph over tyranny. As the party wound down and the stars emerged to cast a gentle light over the reclaimed neighborhood, Dylan sat quietly by his pool, listening to the soft murmur of conversations and the gentle lapping of water. In that serene moment, he knew that while challenges might arise in the future, the spirit of unity and justice would forever prevail. Fade to black.